Hey everyone, it's Mike from Air Raid Attack Podcast. Let me talk to you for just 1 minute. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain to you in 5 simple steps. Number 1, it's free. Number 2, there is creation tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Number 3, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Number 4, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Number 5, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So, how do you sign up? It's simple. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of the Air Raid Attack Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as always, feel free to download the podcast on iTunes and Google and even iHeartRadio. So search Air Raid Attack Podcast on your iHeartRadio app. I'm sure if you want to say Alexa, I'm sure it will pop up in there. Not 100% for sure, but hey, it's worth a shot, right? Exciting news. If you guys watched and listened to the show today, Unhinged Sports Network, the first Monday of the launch, phenomenal day. Friday was great. Definitely give them a shout. Follow. I believe it's Network Unhinged on Twitter. I'll tweet it out here after the show as well. If you chimed in, you listened to a lot of podcasts, a lot of great content, and the best is yet to come. So, yes, you listened to me this morning. Guess what? I'm back. If you didn't get a chance to listen, I'm sure you can archive it. If not, you got to stay tuned. We'll be back on Wednesday on the Unhinged Sports Network, 12 to 1, 10 to 11 on Wednesday, the 7th, if you guys want to know what date it is. Quite a bit to talk about. I'm going to kind of repeat myself to an extent, not to the severity of it, but if you're watching on Periscope, I'm actually live on Periscope. I'm actually wearing my New York Yankee hat in regards to Game 1 of the American League Division Series, which is tonight here in about 20-something minutes. Game 1 between the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees. But the reason why we're going to be talking sports tonight is about the college football recap of this weekend. First and foremost, Oklahoma, Iowa State. If you guys know from me, I'm a diehard Sooner. This one was hard to watch. This one was extremely hard to watch. And you got records upon records upon records for Oklahoma that was snapped. That it was Oklahoma. And offensive-wise, Oklahoma looked decent. I thought Spencer Rattler, majority of the game, played well. I thought the offense, for the most part, was decent enough to score. Offensive line needed some work. Receiving was okay. Running game really was non-existent because without, and trust me, but I know by experience with the Denver Broncos, without an offensive line, it does not matter if you have Peyton Manning as quarterback, or in this case, you have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. Without an offensive line, you got nothing. You don't have a running game. You barely have a passing game. But for Iowa State, they wanted it more. First of all, I've never seen so many penalties in my life on both teams, first and foremost. But if you want to sum up the Iowa State-Oklahoma game, I would say Breece Hall, the running back for Iowa State. Well, why? Well, first of all, he helped Iowa State win its first home game against Oklahoma since 1960, which is pretty. Now, remind you, when it was the actual Big 12, when you had Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, Texas A&M, the North and South teams wasn't playing every year. It was every other 2 years. Back in the 60s and 70s, I'm sure Iowa State and Oklahoma wasn't playing every year. But you sent Oklahoma to 0-2 in the Big 12 play for the first time since 1998 that the Sooners are going to start the Big 12 play 0-2. Worst start for Oklahoma since 2016 when they lost to Houston and Ohio State. First time for Oklahoma to lose back-to-back games since 1999, which was Bob Stoops' first year as head coach of Oklahoma. And let's not forget, if Oklahoma loses to Texas, which is a possibility, as much as I hate saying that, been the first time since 1964, 1965, that Oklahoma started season 1-3. First time Beatles played out in practically in a stadium venue. Gomer Jones was the head coach of Oklahoma. So Oklahoma has a lot of streaks that was broken on Saturday night, and not in a good way. Breece Hall had a pretty good night. 28 carries, $139, 36 yards. He rushed for 36 yards at the 8-yard line. He tied it with 5.5 minutes to go. So next play, he scores. And remind you, he did it against a team that allowed opponents to rush for just 60 yards a game. Like I mentioned, Iowa State, first home game win against Oklahoma since 1960. They came to Norman last year, should have beat Oklahoma. 3 years prior, did beat Oklahoma. Breece Hall, outstanding. Brock Purdy, the quarterback, I thought played very well. The special teams for Iowa State played phenomenal. Nangyu, 85-yard kickoff return that helped. Paul, in my opinion, was the biggest play of the game. Because of COVID, you had 13,724 fans at Jack Trice Stadium. And what happened for the Sooners? Well, you made it to the college football playoff last year. Year prior. Not this year. You lost to Clemson. Georgia, you let go off the ropes. Alabama, LSU. No college football hopes. That dream ended Saturday night in Ames. What happens for Iowa State? Well, they're in first place of the Big 12. Tied for first, if you want to think about it. OSU leads just because of overall record. They played this weekend against Texas Tech. So, first time for Iowa State since 2002. Dan McCarney was head coach of Iowa State, that they started a season 3-0. They have a chance to do that this weekend. Back in those days, they beat Kansas, Nebraska, and Texas Tech. However, that team finished third at the time in the North Division. But congrats to Iowa State. Not to get nothing away from them. Phenomenal win. Great win for the program. Matt Campbell's got them going in the right direction. For Oklahoma, well, offensively, you got issues still. The offensive line definitely needs work. Running game definitely needs some help. I thought Rattler played well. Receiving core was decent. The defense, however, not great. Ronnie Perkins potentially could be back soon, hopefully. That will help them out in the defensive line. The secondary looked pretty bad. For a team that was projected to win the Big 12, and I remind you, they can still win the Big 12. They need a lot of help. And I mean, they need a lot of help. They need, obviously, Oklahoma, they got to win out. For Kansas State, Iowa State, they still got to play each other. But they need Iowa State and Kansas State, let's put it that way, to lose still 2 more games. Because remind you, Iowa State, Kansas State has a tiebreaker over Oklahoma. So in order for the Sooners to get to the Big 12 championship game, it's not a hard task. They got to beat Texas. They got to beat TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas, West Virginia, OSU, Baylor. It's doable. It's not going to be easy. What's funny is just about 3 weeks ago, all the Iowa State fans was jumping off because they lost to Louisiana. Now, I'm sure they're back on. But for this week, it's do or die for both Oklahoma and Texas. I still think technically, Oklahoma's eliminated. But for Texas, losing TCU, coming from behind to beat Texas Tech, that speaks volumes too. Has the Big 12 finally got caught up to Oklahoma and Texas? We'll see. We'll see. But the Big 12, the all eyes on the Big 12 relies on Oklahoma State to go practically for OSU. They got to win out. And for Texas, you're going to have to win out. Oklahoma, you can play to win another Big 12 championship and a trip to the Sugar Bowl because that's their destination. But they got to win out. Again, you're listening to the Air Raid Attack podcast. As always, follow us on Twitter at airraid_podcast. Listen to the show on iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you listen to your podcast. Coming up next, we got a few questions about college football, so keep them coming. And stay tuned. We'll talk some more college football as we recap the weekend that it was in college football as we head into the second week of October. And just a reminder, Sooner fans, it's all right. You just got to win. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on the Air Raid Attack.
What's going on, everyone? Dave from Fan Futsal here. What is Fan Futsal, you might be wondering? Well, Fan Futsal is a simplified fantasy soccer game. In Fan Futsal, you select 5 clubs instead of 8 to 11 individual players for your fantasy lineups. Our fantasy scoring is based on match scores, not individual player stats, so it's a lot easier to follow. It's free to sign up and super easy to set lineups, so to learn more and to get started playing a simplified fantasy soccer game, go to fanfutsal, fanfutsal.com.
And we're back. Welcome back. If you're just joining in, definitely rewind the last 15 minutes of the podcast, and you'll get the glimpse of how I can be actually unbiased. People think just because it's Oklahoma that I'm pretty biased. But, hey, when it's reality, you got to accept it, move on. If you're just joining in, also follow me on Periscope. I don't know what my link is, but I'll definitely add that in the description here on the podcast once the show has ended and concluded. And if you're just joining in, comment, enjoy the show live on Periscope. So definitely keep the comments on there if you're watching on Periscope. In the meantime, positive cases galore coming up with COVID-19 in regards to college football. Of course, Arizona head coach Kevin Sumlin tests positive. He's immediately quarantined. From my knowledge, not many people were exposed to him, but gosh darn. But so anyway, someone tests positive for COVID-19. Former head coach, football coach of Florida State, Hall of Fame coach, legend, whatever you want to call it, the GOAT of college football, if you will. Bobby Bowden tests positive as well. Florida State, excuse me, here I am. Florida State's going to start Jordan Travis against Notre Dame on Saturday. Kind of curious how he's going to do, just for the simple fact that he's their third straight quarterback, different quarterback that's going to start for the Seminoles. And we'll see how that turns out. It's going to be an interesting matchup, especially when it comes to Notre Dame, because they're right in the mix of the college football race, even though we're barely into the season. But, we still got to talk some college football. Questions, I have a few questions and an opinion. One of them was on Periscope, pretty much about Mississippi State, asking about the air raid. Huge, humongous win for Arkansas. Great win for Arkansas, especially for that program, a program that has fizzled and seen its tougher years as of late. So great win for Arkansas. Mississippi State, of course, they were hoping to get that win, go 2-0 in conference play, especially coming off the LSU upset a week or two ago. So great win for Arkansas and for that one for that program trying to get back up. Question: what do you think about Alabama and Georgia? They're good. They are good. So is Florida. Alabama, I think, is better than they were a year ago. They look more explosive on offense. The defense continues to be dominant. I thought A&M, I predicted A&M as my upset win of the week. That didn't go so well. Mac Jones, over 400, I think it was 454, I think is what he's thrown. He looks good. Alabama looks good. They look scary good. Florida, of course, they took care of South Carolina, which was as expected. I'm going to see here, if you're Alabama, here's what's going to come up. You got Ole Miss this week. Georgia, Tennessee. You got 2 top 15 teams there. You're home against Mississippi State, and Mississippi State looks pretty good. Decent enough. Whether can they compete? We'll see. But you got LSU. Then, of course, Auburn down the road. Now, the lucky thing for Alabama is they do not play Florida. So that Florida-Alabama game could easily be for a trip for the playoff. Now, the Big 12 continues to struggle, and they will. Trust me, they will. Because Oklahoma's already out of the college football playoff. You're not going to make it with 2 losses. I don't care what they do the rest out. They're here out from the rest of the season. They can eliminate Texas this week. OSU, they're going to lose. They don't do well against Oklahoma. We all know that. I don't know where the Iowa State game is at. Comment here on Periscope. Oklahoma State will screw up as they always do. Absolutely. Absolutely. And he's familiar with the Big 12 as much as I am. If you know anybody from Oklahoma State, and I love how Oklahoma State is. You look like garbage against Tulsa. It wasn't until the fourth quarter you put West Virginia away. And you won by 40 against Kansas. A program that's absolutely just... Would you consider Kansas being the worst team in conference? Don't be surprised. OSU goes to Waco this week. No, next week. They got Ames. They got to go to. They have Iowa State and Texas at home. They go to Kansas State. If you guys know the history of OSU, they always lose in Manhattan. Of course, you go to Norman, which for OSU, you haven't had any luck against Oklahoma. Mike Gundy beat him twice. One of the times was Bob Stoops should have kicked the ball out of bounds on the punt. Let alone he shouldn't even repunt it. Just let the penalty take itself. Let OSU handle the rest of the way. They got to go to Fort Worth, and they're home against Texas Tech. I at least see 3 losses in that mix. And probably, definitely one of them is going to be at home. Totally agree. No Big 12 this year in the playoff. I do not see it at all. Oklahoma's already out, so you can kick them to the curb. Hopefully they can beat Texas and kick them to the curb. And like I said, OSU's going to fizzle themselves out. By the end of the year, they're still going to have 4 losses. You know, theoretically, the Big 12 champion could theoretically have 2, 3, 4 losses. It's a Sun Belt, Conference USA, the AAC, Mountain West. If you want to go old school, the WAC, which no longer exists, at least football-wise. A Power 5 conference could potentially have a 3, 4, 5 loss champion. I mean, for God's sakes, Oklahoma already has 2. And they could still have more. Iowa State's not out of the woodshed. We'll see. It's just a weird college football year. I don't consider it a college football season because, you know, again, half your games have been canceled if you're non-conference, or it depends on what conference you're in. You may not. I think the MAC at this point, the Mid-America Conference, I believe is the only conference yet that's even determined if they're going to play. All of a sudden, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the Mountain West realizes, we can play. Absolutely. You got to roll with it. And for Oklahoma, yeah, our expectations are high. But let's be honest. We expected a down year this year anyway. As I mentioned on the show earlier this morning on the Unhinged Sports Network, if Oklahoma did not cancel, if it wasn't for COVID, Oklahoma easily could have lost to Tennessee in Norman, and West Point, they could have lost to Army. Because if Hall ran over 100 and I think it was 139, we know what Army did to in Norman 2-3 years ago. Talk about a rebuilding team. This team, this team could easily be 1-4, presuming that they were to play their non-conference schedule. Another comment coming in. Hi, how are you? I am doing well. It's a Monday. I'm definitely tired. I'm ready to call it a night. Follow the show on Twitter at airraid_podcast, hashtag airraid_podcast to chime in on anything sports or even thing related that's decent. Anything vulgar or anything that matter, we will not discuss at all. Anything political, we definitely won't discuss, at least not on air. Because you talk political and you get nowhere. You just get a bunch of people with their pennies in the wallet. Clemson looks good. Clemson looks absolutely good. I'm really looking forward to Miami this week. I think that could be an excellent game. Stay tuned on Thursday or Wednesday morning, 11 to 12. 10 to 11. Yes, 10 to 11. I'll eventually get my time right. 10 to 11 on the Unhinged Sports Network. Picks of the week, upset of the week. Stay tuned. You could potentially see Miami in that boat. But you look at Clemson's schedule. I'm not really too worried about Virginia Tech at the end of the year. The game I'm really focused on, and I think besides the Miami game, is going to be at Notre Dame. And that's if the season continues. Let's put it that way. If the season continues, you got Notre Dame in South Bend. Georgia Tech could be interesting on the road. I don't think they have enough talent to beat Clemson. But Notre Dame, definitely. Besides Miami. Does Notre Dame play Miami? That's the next thing. I don't even know. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the love. I don't even know if they do. I'm rumbling here, but I'm going to go real quick and then we'll finish out the show. Notre Dame actually plays Clemson, North Carolina. Okay. There you have it. So there you go. We'll eventually get back to where I was. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see how the college football turns out. Texas Tech, I think, could easily, again, this is how weird this year is. Texas Tech could easily be in first place. They should have beat Texas. Should have beat Kansas State. I think Kansas State rode a hot streak. But it is what it is. It's 2020. You can't get anywhere than this. I did see Bowman. I did see Bowman. Is he even coming back? Oklahoma smells like cat piss. Yeah, it's not a very good team this year. Presuming they actually have a schedule next year, they can be better, but Kobe may be around next year. We'll see. Definitely see. XFL, we'll talk real briefly on the XFL before we head out on the day. The XFL comes back 2022. We'll see. We'll see how that turns out. I'm not going to get excited until we launch it because we've gone through now the XFL 3.0. And, that's about as much as it's going to be. So the XFL is coming back. Congrats to Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup playoff final, beating Dallas. I don't even know how many games that took, but congrats to them. Game 1 of the ALDS tonight, Yankees to Rays, is just started on TBS. The Yankees are the road team. They're actually I believe it's out in San Diego is what they're being played at. Kansas City leads the New England Patriots on Monday Night Football 6-3 in the second quarter. The game that was postponed from yesterday due to COVID-19 is starting back Kansas City without Cam Newton not playing in the game due to COVID. Of course, you got in other news real quick, real quick. Iowa's Hawkeye players Colbert and McHale out for the 2020 season. per COVID, they're opting out, and that will be all she wrote for the wonderful show that is called the Air Raid Attack Podcast. Usually it's going to be longer, but tonight, hey, it's a Monday. We'll be back on Wednesday night for a much longer podcast, so I promise you that. But as always, stay tuned. Up to the minute news, information about the show, breaking news, just topics in itself. Follow the show on Twitter at airrate_podcast. Listen to the podcast. Subscribe on Google, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast from. Download it and listen. Stay tuned and listen to us on Monday and Wednesday mornings on the Unhinged Sports Network. And last but not least, before we wrap up the show, you can now listen to the Air Raid Attack Podcast on Amazon Music. That's right. So all you Amazon Music listeners out there, search Air Raid Attack Podcast and follow. I guess that's their way of subscribing. I don't even know. But that's how it goes. So you guys have a wonderful night. Stay safe. Make sure you wear your mask if you please to. In other words, we'll talk some more sports Wednesday. Until then, take